For quite some time now, the gaming handheld market has been in decline. Ever since the rise of the iPhone in 2007, handheld gaming has become irrelevant. The casual gaming market has left the handheld segment, moving towards smartphone gaming. After all, why pay $200 to play Mario when you can play Candy Crush for free on an iPhone or Android smartphone you already own? The 3DS has lasted only around 6 years, has sold the worst of any handheld series from Nintendo, featured a so-so library, and is being replaced with a console handheld hybrid from Nintendo, the Switch. It's underpowered, the screen is low resolution, and it relied way too much on a gimmick that was out of style not long after the 3DS actually came out. It also had one of the worst DRM systems of any recent handheld, as you couldn't just log in to any other computer or 3DS or whatever and download your games or buy games from it. No, instead what you had to do was transfer your account from one 3DS to another. So if your 3DS broke, you'd be on the phone with Nintendo and whatnot. Or if your 3DS was stolen, same exact thing. Or if, let's just say, you wanted to sell your 3DS, well, you can't really do that without losing all those games you wasted money on, can't you? The PlayStation Vita was even worse, letting down people who had wanted a successor to the PSP. It was more powerful than the 3DS, but it had numerous issues of its own, from proprietary memory cards that cost way too much, to a similar lack of games. There were also numerous false promises. For example, the 3G model of the Vita couldn't even be used to play games online, remote play never worked with the PS3, and few games used cross-save functionality. The FTC even stepped in and busted Sony for false advertising. The Vita ended up not being console quality on the go like what the advertisement said, outside of maybe a few early titles.
PlayStation Vita, console quality on the go.
Instead of being a smash hit success that every single gamer wanted to have, the Vita ended up being all but ignored by mainstream gamers and shunned by the Nintendo audience, who was making up excuses for not buying a Vita. After all, they love their handhelds, and a watered down version of a console game to them was better than having the full game on the go. At least until Nintendo announced the Switch, and it's now okay when they do it. Sony essentially abandoned the Vita, and the Vita only ended up getting anime games that bordered on hentai, with many people calling the Vita the waifu station, due to the fact that its library solely consisted of anime and indie games. No, seriously. Just look at the Vita section at your local GameStop the next time you're there and want to see something about as depressing as, say, your local Radio Shack store. So with the Nintendo Switch about to come out, it's kind of a hard sell. It's $300, it has to have games ported to it, and there's no guarantee that the Nintendo Switch is actually going to be powerful, since Nintendo cares more about gimmicks and forcing whatever gimmick they came up with this week on you than they do telling you how powerful their new system is. I mean, sure, Nintendo's going around doing the same old bullshit that they did with the Nintendo Wii U, where they're like, we have third party this time, we promise, we swear guys, we have third party, we're gonna have all these amazing games on our system, we've even got Ken Levine and whatnot praising our system, and that's what they did with the Wii U. This time, they had this whole list of developers making games for the Switch, and you know who was there? Todd freaking Howard. You know, the target of the song Little Lies by Fleetwood Mac. And that's the thing. The Nintendo Switch is a bad sell. And lately, because of this, there is kind of a void in the gaming market, especially with the handheld gaming console market. The Vita is dead, and the only system left is the Nintendo Switch. And that system has a very uncertain future ahead of it. On the other hand, there has been a new breed of devices you could call Android handhelds. Nearly all of these are a spiritual successor to emulation handhelds, such as the GP2X, the Dingu, and the Pandora, but with a twist. Instead of running custom operating systems, they run Android, which means that you can not only run emulators, but you can run mobile games on them. Of course, with few Android games using controller buttons, the most you can realistically do with these is run emulators. Devices in this category include the GPD XD, the now discontinued NVIDIA Shield Portable, and the Archos Gamepad. However, the thing is, it's possible to make a system that has more games than just Candy Crush and Visual Boy Advance running a Pokemon Fire Red ROM. They can do better than that. And Gamepad Digital, or GPD, knows this. They decided to start an Indiegogo for something that actually has games, the GPD Win. The GPD Win is similar to these Android handhelds, but instead of using Android and ARM hardware, it uses Windows and Intel hardware. For around $360, you get a 6-inch screen, a mini texting phone style keyboard, and game buttons. But is it any good, however? Well, let's find out. First, let's talk about the specs. The system comes with similar specs to the Microsoft Surface 3 tablet or numerous other tablets you can probably find for sale that have Windows on them. The system has an Atom Z8700 processor, Cherry Trail HD graphics, and 4 gigs of RAM. It also has 64 gigs of storage out of the box, and you can install a microSD card in a rear slot for more storage. However, one major difference is the GPD Win has a cooling fan to remove excess heat, and that's because the GPD Win really heats up, especially when compared to other handheld gaming devices that usually use lower powered processors. The GPD Win is also a clamshell form factor handheld, with a Gorilla Glass touchscreen display, a mini keyboard with a similar feel to that of the average texting phone you'd find in the mid-2000s, such as a Palm Trio, a BlackBerry, your typical Windows mobile phone, or any phone with a slider, and a complete Xbox 360 style controller minus the vibration. Some compromises were made to fit this form factor, such as the LT and RT buttons being digital click buttons, and the system using Vita style analog sticks that can't click down, instead using awkwardly placed L3 and R3 buttons that you have to reach with your hand to push. This also means that for some kinds of games, such as Call of Duty, where you consistently click the left analog stick to sprint, you'll want to connect an external controller. Perhaps the biggest weak spot, however, is the D-pad. It just feels like one of those cheap Chinese controllers you find on AliExpress that don't quite work right. But the Vita analog sticks more than make up for that. Aside from these flaws, when you're playing a game that doesn't require you to hit those buttons frequently or a single-player game, the game controller part works quite well. The buttons feel great and playing games on this is a joy. One unique feature is that the ABXY buttons have PlayStation button icons as well for when you're running those PlayStation emulators. The system on the back features a USB 3.0 port and a microSD port for expansion. Officially, the slot is rated at 128 gigs max. However, people have used 256 gig microSD cards in there. There is a major problem, however. The microSD card reader in the GPD Win is slow, and it's not uncommon to see games lock up as the system loads data. A way around this is to use a USB flash drive, such as a Samsung Fit flash drive. There is only one USB 3.0 port, however, so it's up to you to decide if you want to use it for a low-profile flash drive or for plugging in something like a controller, serial adapter, Ethernet adapter, or just about anything that can fit in that port. If you decide to go the flash drive and microSD route, I'd install larger and newer games on the flash drive and older games on the microSD card due to the loading issues. There's a HDMI jack and a 3.5mm headset jack. There's also a USB-C port for charging. However, I've heard mixed reports about how well it works for hooking up external devices such as Ethernet adapters. On the bottom of the GPD Win, there's a fan speed control switch. When I got mine, it was set to the max speed, and you should leave it there. The system will heat up, and you don't want your system to throttle whatsoever. The screen of the GPD Win is amazing. It's bright, crisp, and colorful, and even games on low look great with this screen. You're not going to get some cheap washed out display with meg colors that you'll commonly find on something like a $10 track phone or $50 tablet. Instead, you're getting a display that really makes your system stand out amongst all the 3DSs and Vitas. It's only 720p, but then again, this is an Atom CPU, so maxing out the resolution isn't as taxing on it as it would be with, say, a 4K or 1080p LCD. You will want to enable rotation lock, however, as the system has a rotation sensor, and it can detect when your system is in portrait mode, which is not something you want for a clamshell device. The speakers, on the other hand, leave much to be desired. The only speaker on the system is on the right-hand side of your system, and it's easily covered up and muffled by your hand. The system also features AC, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth, which are standard in modern devices. The battery life is average for a modern-day handheld. You'll only get a few hours out of it, but that's also a few hours of gaming. The battery is big, being rated at 6700 mAh, and it's rated for around 6 to 8 hours. However, chances are in real world you'll get around 3 to 5 hours instead of 6 to 8. On the software side, the GPD Win runs Windows 10. Now, Windows 10 is less than ideal for gaming compared to previous versions, and the creators of the system know this, as they even give you a manual that tells you how to tweak Windows 10 to make it run faster for gaming, giving you tutorials on how to disable Windows Update, Windows Defender, Cortana, screen rotation, and how to do other things such as, for example, going into your system and disabling additional services and apps that start up, and of course Windows features and whatnot. And I ended up disabling Windows updates since, well, I don't trust Windows 10 with updates. The last thing I want are updates giving me tons and tons of problems, and I've seen Windows 10 updates cause systems to have problems in the real world. And does anybody remember that Windows 10 update that broke Internet for Everyone? If you don't like Windows 10 and don't mind giving up most of the gaming functionality, you can always install Linux on your GPD Win. That might be more viable one day in the future, but for now, AAA gaming companies would rather make games for Windows than they would Linux. When you boot up Windows for the first time, it's clear who this device was intended for. After you make your account and punch in your product key for the first time, you're greeted with a Windows 10 install that's completely stock, with a few tweaks already done out of the box from the manual. There's no bundled software except for a Steam installer on your desktop. Windows takes up around 20 gigs, and even if you leave Windows Update on it, it'll likely chew up even more of the already small amount of space. So if I were you, I would purchase a micro SD card, since the system was essentially designed for a micro SD card. The real question is, how well do games run on the GPD Win? Well, performance-wise, they run about as well as you'd expect an Intel Atom Z8700 based tablet to run them. It's far more powerful than the Atoms you'd see years ago in netbooks, and it can run quite a few games. As long as the game isn't a poorly optimized title or too new, it should run fine at the lowest settings. For some games, you might need to use texture mods or config file tweaks to boost frame rates. A greater constraint might possibly be the limited storage space, especially as games are constantly being around 50 gigs. You might want to get a 128 gig microSD or 128 gig flash drive, or if you have the money, a 256 gig or 200 gig microSD card and a flash drive that's pretty big as well. Unlike the Vita, there's no overpriced proprietary memory cards here to see. Just games. Remember, if it'll run on a Surface 3, it'll run on here. This also means that this has more games worth playing than the Switch, 3DS, or Vita. For the most part, setting up controls isn't too hard of a task. There are 3 positions on the GPD Win's gamepad. One is for mouse emulation, which emulates scrolling with the left stick, arrow keys with the ABXY buttons, moving the mouse with the right stick, and left or right clicking with the respective shoulder buttons. The other 2 settings are for the direct input mode and the X input mode. The former is used for older video games, and the latter is used for video games made since the mid-2000s. How well each title works is highly dependent on the game. X-input games are likely to work out of the box. However, some games can be difficult to play with the L3 and R3 buttons being in an awkward spot. If you want to sprint in Call of Duty, you'll need to reach your finger a good distance to push those buttons. To make matters worse, many direct console ports refuse to let you remap buttons, only letting you use a few pre-selected control schemes copy-pasted from the console versions. Direct input games, on the other hand, are more likely to let you configure them, but at the same time, each button will be referred to by a number. And some games like Halo PC might have input sensitivity issues due to how they're coded. And when you're playing games like Halo PC, you'll notice it'll say something like push button 4 to switch weapon instead of press X to switch weapon. Emulators, on the other hand, are another story, and these should be easy to set up due to the fact that you have the ability to choose between each input API with a simple switch. In the end, for some games, you'll want to plug in a 360 controller, a keyboard, or a mouse, and use them instead. This won't make the GPD Win as portable, however, and it will only make it slightly more portable than an LCD PS1 when you use external controllers. So what are my thoughts on the GPD Win? On one hand, there's pretty much no competition. There's the Smash Z, which has been in development since 2015, uses the Steam controller's touchpads instead of the more familiar 360 controller layout, AMD processors instead of Intel, is more or less designed to be a gaming-only device, and it still isn't actually out yet. There's also the Dragon Box Pyra, which also comes in a similar handheld clamshell gaming device form factor with a keyboard and controls, but it runs Linux for ARM, similar to that of a Raspberry Pi, is targeted more towards the open source community, isn't going to run Windows or Steam for Linux games, costs more, and it still isn't out yet. Right now, if you want a handheld computer or a portable gaming console with Windows, this is your only choice until these two competitors actually come out. On the other hand, the GPD Win has some flaws, and I've heard reports of everything from dead units and broken hinges to software glitches. I've personally experienced glitches with sleep mode on mine, such as the device coming out of sleep mode while it's still shut, the device not coming out of sleep mode when I open it, and worst of all, a time where all I got was a pointer on a black screen when I kept opening mine up. I've also noticed the device rebooting or going out of standby while it's still shut, leaving the system running with the screen on while it's closed, and I'd recommend shutting the GPD Win down when you're not going to use it. However, who knows if these software issues are due to the GPD Win or Windows 10 being a buggy piece of shit. Older units had frequent GPU driver crashing, and mine did too until I disabled all of Windows' effects per the manual instructions. Once I did that, the system has not had a single GPU driver crash. Perhaps the biggest flaw isn't the device itself, but it's the marketing and availability. You can only buy the GPD Win from Chinese websites such as AliExpress or Geekbuy, and they take a while to ship your item, especially if you don't use DHL. Buying something from a Chinese seller might seem shady to many people as well, as you can't just walk in and buy one from Best Buy or order it from Amazon with 2-day shipping. And good luck if you need repair or returns for your device. It's not like there's no appeal to this device, however, as if you play this in public, you're guaranteed to get as many people looking at you and asking you questions about it as a smartwatch would back in 2015 when those were new, and wearing any smartwatch would mean you had the new Apple Watch. And when you think about it, the GPD Win is absolutely the right idea, and the one that more gaming-focused brands need to take note of. Here's a handheld that, instead of being restricted to the tiny or low-quality Android game library and the same bunch of emulators as a Raspberry Pi, can actually run the Steam games you want to run on it. It even has tons of non-gaming uses too, thanks to the fact that this is a full-fledged PC, complete with Wi-Fi, a USB port, and a physical keyboard. Want to install Ethernet cabling in a building or trying to diagnose network issues? Plug in a USB Ethernet adapter and plug the cable to the adapter. Want to connect to Cisco equipment or a high-end server that uses serial? Connect a USB to serial adapter and then open PuTTY up. Want to work on a car that uses OBD2 or a specific proprietary dongle or suite of software? Plug in your adapter and connect it to your car. And of course install the software, because it'll run it because it's got Windows. Want to be a hacker? Install Linux and pretend you're that guy from the movie Hackers. Need cash fast? Plug in a cheap monoprice tablet and draw dicks for furries on the internet. Is the GPD Win worth it? Despite the flaws, yes. If you're looking for this kind of device, unless some more reputable company takes a shot at this market, then it's worth it. And so far, the big gaming companies and numerous other tech companies have been reluctant to make a product that actually lets you game on the go. Razer made a gaming tablet with a click-on controller and an unreleased handheld with a similar concept to the GPD Win. Nvidia made a handheld they later discontinued that only lets you run Android games or stream PC games, and all Alienware made in the most related market segment was an 11-inch gaming laptop that they later canned. Who knows? Maybe this will be the device to convince gaming companies to make something in a handheld form factor. Or not, but who knows? The impact of this is real, and I know for a fact that this device will, in fact, wow people. Imagine the look on PC gamers' faces when you're playing, say, Halo or other shooters in Applebee's while waiting for your order, instead of, say, playing the same Pokemon game over and over again. Why play a rehash of Pokemon when you can play your favorite video game while waiting for your order in Applebee's or Taco Bell or Burger King or anywhere? You can do this with the GPD Win. You can't with the 3DS or Vita or Switch. And that's all that needs to be said. Because here's the thing. Why should you settle for playing Pokemon Sun and Moon or yet another Mario Kart on car trips when you could be playing games such as Burnout Paradise, Black Ops 2, Mass Effect, Bioshock, Fallout New Vegas. I've even heard of people playing games like Alien Isolation on the GPD Win at low settings, of course, with meh frame rates, but it'll work on there. Could the Nintendo Switch give you a library of games this big? No, it just can't. You can't beat the GPD Win when it comes to game selection. I mean, if I wanted a handheld, I'd want a good game library. And the GPD Win gives me what numerous handhelds have failed to deliver. A good game library. That's all that needs to be said. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more.